Welcome back to another episode of Mac Football Forever. I'm Caleb Carter. This is Alex Alvarado in the end zone of Husky Stadium doing his thing. And we're here to bring you another episode of State of the Mac. We've already talked about the Toledo Rockets. We've talked about the Ohio Bobcats. This is Friday, January 22nd. So whatever information you're getting about today's team, Northern Illinois Huskies, could be dependent, on what's happened to this point. A lot of transfers for NIU, one of two winless football teams in the 2020 season. Alex, obviously we've got a lot to say. We could go on and on about them, but what you got?
I have my hand raised. Can I ask a question?
Please.
My information is only based on conspiracy theorists that I get off social media. Does that matter?
Oh, so you've been in a Husky dog pound. Got it. Okay, great. So we're going to give you 5 things to talk about, 5 main key ideas here related to what the state of Northern Illinois football. Obviously, the Mac's premier team of the 2010 decade. The tail end of it, obviously, big change in the form of Thomas Hammock becoming the coach. The alum.
That's a good pun, because dogs shake their tails.
Oh my goodness, you were.
That's good, and it's really close to their butt, which is very close to the kind of season they had this year.
It was, but anyway, there's a lot to be said about where this program is at right now. I think we'll start with the really young defense. And if you had to rate the NIU defense on scale of grizzled veterans to babies in a cradle, I mean, they're kind of like, they're just finally like reaching up to the top of the cradle and they're trying to get out. That's where they're at. They barely hold themselves up.
The only one I trust to walk in the street by himself is Jordan Gandy. He's the only one that's allowed to walk in the street. Everyone else is got to hang out in the crib.
Obviously, NIU had some returners on the defensive side of the football. Kyle Pugh, who's actually going to come back for yet another season. Good for him, because I love the guy. NIU had a lot of young players on the defensive line, in the defensive secondary. Jordan Gandy, obviously, being an all-MAC player. Devin Lafayette, another guy with an interception, close to the top of the team, leading tackles. And you saw a lot of teams get to the secondary and throw the ball and take their shots at NIU. So a lot of defensive backs are among the team leaders in tackles, if you'll take notice. That's not what you want, but it gives you an idea of where NIU's defense was in 2020. So they've got, guys like that. They've got guys like Michael Kennedy on the defensive line, James Esther on the defensive line, DeVaron Rayner, Rasheen Thomas. A lot of young guys from like the Midwest, namely Wisconsin and Illinois, with the potential to make an impact in the next few years. And we'll get more later into how good they've been at recruiting and where they've been recruiting from. But for now, the results are only there in increments because it obviously was not a good season for NIU. They're building from the cupboard was pretty bare. And there was a lot of frustration with that program around having a MAC championship winning roster and immediately regressing and then regressing even more. But Coach Thomas Hammock is building his team, in his words, and he's going for his guys. So we've seen the deconstruction of NIU football that's been a powerhouse in recent years, and the defense has been the biggest part of that identity. What's happened to the defense? Well, last year you saw them got torched a lot. And so, Alex, I'll let you say what, as an outside observer and as a Western, or as an Eastern Michigan fan, somebody who's watched MAC football in the West a lot in recent years, how has NIU fallen off, and where do you think the program is right now in that respect?
NIU in 2020 was 10th in the MAC in points per game allowed with 38.7. That's where they're at in the MAC. They just give up so many damn points. We're going to talk about like how young this team is later, I guess. But that's essentially it. It's just a young group that not only is it young on the roster for players, it's young with its head coach, and it's young and an inexperienced there. 2019, his first year, it just seemed like it was an unprepared unit. This year, it seemed like it had an idea of how it wanted to prepare, but because of the pandemic, who knows like what kind of preparation it was even able to have. But it did play a ton of freshmen. I think it had like 7 freshmen starting on defense at like the middle of the year last year in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, at any point
they were playing. I guess like that's where it's at. It will always just be young until it gets older.
At any point last year, they were playing multiple freshman cornerbacks at a time, multiple freshmen along the defensive line, And I mean, Jordan Hanson was a starting safety. Guys like Dylan Thomas, who wasn't a natural cornerback, stepping in there, and some other spots, some linebacker spots, like some rotational guys were younger. So yeah, even the guys they're bringing in as backups are freshmen or inexperienced redshirt freshmen. So it was just everywhere. It was the youth is everywhere, and they have to build towards the future because this year was never going to be a 4-2 season in 6 games. It just wasn't.
Right.
Carrying on from there, obviously they have some youth on both sides of the football. Harrison Whaley and Trayvon Rudolph are a couple of those guys that could be those playmakers for the next few years. I think Trayvon Rudolph probably isn't the superstar at wide receiver who's going to do things. I think they're going to have to turn somebody else into that guy. And we don't know if Dustin Fletcher is going to be the guy next year or not. Rocky Lombardi, transfer from Michigan State, will likely, in my mind, come and start. I don't think he's coming there. If he doesn't think he's going to play. Alex and I've had some back and forth on that about, whether he's the guy or if he's, he doesn't even have the skills. I think if you go back and watch his arm talent, like you see the deep ball there, the intermediate passes are in. So I don't know what NIU's offense looks like in 2021 if we got a good grasp of what we should expect. But there's also a lot of potential for the offense being a lot different if Lombardi's the quarterback versus if Fletcher is the quarterback. Maybe we're missing something else there. I don't know how much to say about what the offense is going to look like until we get into the fall, until we've seen and heard more. Bowers technically hasn't left. It would really surprise me if Bowers comes back. He did just have a kid. He's been in college football for 6 years, and he's not from the Midwest. So if he does come back, yes, Bowers is in all likelihood the quarterback. I guess I just don't know. Maybe he loves the game more than I realize, and he wants to be there. But going from Cal and then heading to NIU and winning 5 games in 2 years, and going from that to instead starting a family and doing
he's not the first guy to play football with a kid.
No, but it's to be the guy who's been there, has kind of had a lot of experiences as a football player, to go away from home and do it at a program that's struggling. Like this isn't me making a decision for him. I just honestly thought he would want to move on. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be there next year. That would actually be really interesting to see if they make a big jump, because there were games in 2020 where, Bowers was slinging the ball. But, they got to find some guys first, and they got to figure some stuff out offensively. So the second point I kind of wanted to get at was when you looked at NIU this season, there's a reason they were winless. They didn't really excel at anything. Like, did you look at NIU this year? Was there any point you looked at NIU this year and went, "Oh, they're really good at this"? Any particular thing?
The one thing that we're expecting out of NIU, mostly because of Thomas Hammock and his personal resume, is just the running backs have to be good. We thought it was going to be Aaron Collins. It ended up being Harrison Whaley, a freshman, over the JUCO guy who started the year, actually. Mm-hmm. And Whaley, he didn't have the scoring spree, right? He didn't have the kind of games where he went off for 250 and 2, anything like that. But he did have some nice moves, and he did, have moments where he had not crazy jukes, but he just had the ability to stop and turn on a dime and make space for himself with his speed. I don't know if he's going to be the running back going forward, but I feel like that's the kind of running back that Hammock got the kind of guy he liked.
Yeah.
Hammock's going to keep getting the kinds of guys that he likes at that running back group. And that is, I guess, more or less of a preview going forward. That right there, those performances, that kind of athleticism, that sort of immediate, just give me the ball and let me see what I can do with it sort of shit. That is to be expected out of NIU going forward with Hammock there. I don't know if Whaley's going to be the guy going forward for the running back, like how you said for Trayvon Rudolph. You don't know if he's going to be the receiver, but that's a very nice start to see.
Yeah. He's freshman All-American for a reason. For the Huskies, I still think everyone agrees that they could be as much as 2 or 3 years away from the level of success they have to have. But so we'll get into it more later. They've got to start showing something this year. And one of the ways they could start showing is if some of these guys they've recruited, start showing out. They've gotten some really good secondary recruits, like Eddie Jackson comes to mind. From New Jersey. They've picked up, really good guys on the defensive side of the football in general. Some guys from Wisconsin along the offensive line who are rated pretty well. Some really solid 3-star recruits. And it has to start translating. I mean, there's guys like Logan Shernitz have started to play and on the offensive line, and they just have to make that leap. When you look at guys that they've recruited, like Javon Ducker from Nebraska, he was like the state's player of the year a year ago, and he's a guy that goes into a crowded backfield. NIU goes from like looking like the cupboard's potentially bare at running back to that recruiting paying off. You're looking at the quarterback spot being like but Hammock continues to play his game of picking up transfer quarterbacks and bringing in guys who can play immediately, and pairing that against someone like Fletcher potentially being the guy in a year or two. So there's a lot of things to look at offensively that could be better. And then obviously defensively, I think the talent level, the potential is really high, but we've got to see the results still. How about we head from there? I think it's really important to talk about the transfer portal for this team specifically. Alex, we've talked about this a lot. Essentially, what it boils down to is he's still losing the guys that Rod Carey recruited to that team, which isn't, I don't think, a big deal. But he's also lost some of the guys he's brought to campus.
Yeah, that part hurts a lot more. Like, and by my count, NIU has 18 guys leaving via transfer. One of them, Weston Kramer, was a starter in 2020. So,
really
I think it is important. Like, if I'm gonna say like there's a lot of guys leaving, not all of them were starters. So I feel like it is important to say that, but they're losing some depth. And they're losing depth with guys that probably weren't going to play, like Connor Neville, Andrew Hydett. Like they probably weren't going to play because they were both transfer quarterbacks, and like they saw, like you said, with Fletcher, whatever the case is going to be there. But it does just suck to see like there's just so many guys just leaving right there. Like Mark Aiken, I think he was the Hammock guy. Like Anton Walker, I believe he was too. Romel Gaston was a signee when he was hired, I believe.
That sounds right.
Yeah. And some of these guys are, whether they're Hammock gets, whether they're Carey gets, a lot of these guys were Illinois or Chicago natives, and those are the guys that you don't want to lose.
Yeah, and we've seen in recent weeks with on the recruiting trail, and this is a topic that could go longer another day, but essentially they're getting guys from the suburbs, they're getting some Chicago guys, but they are really staying regionally in Wisconsin. And there were 16 Wisconsin guys on the roster in 2020. I think that number has to go up in 2021. I'd have to take a closer look later, but they really love that region. And obviously Hammock and the coaching staff's connection to Wisconsin is a big deal for them. But they have to see the results of those changes this year. That's a good point to get to our final part of the episode. Everyone I've talked to tends to agree with this. We have to see measured improvement from the Huskies. Whether that is 4-8 and competitive in like 3 of the games that they didn't play in, whether that's 6-6 and winning like 3 or 4 games in the MAC West. I don't think they can be any better than like a 6-win team this year. But even saying that, doing that's not going from 0 wins to 6 wins is an extremely big hop, or an extremely big leap. Alex, if NIU is a 5 or 6 win team this year, what's the biggest difference for them? Like what gets better?
I don't know if I can say a lot gets better until they know how to score a lot of points. Like they could end up being, for whatever reason, a good defensive team, but I'm not going to buy into that unless they're averaging like 20, not 20, like 38 points a game. If they're like getting into the 40s every once in a while. I feel like just like figuring out how to score a shit ton of points is the best way to move this team forward, really.
I'd say because I think they're capable of like, having a back that is going to be able to do that in the next few years based on who they've recruited. Obviously the kid out of Georgia, Ontario Brown, was a big get for them, and maybe he takes the backfield from like good to great, but I don't know. If they're going to do it, they're going to still do it, run game first, and that can't change. I think Ross Bowers, bringing Bowers in, was the potential for them to they wanted to sling the ball around, and that was what they were going to do. But their running game has to, they need to rush for 200 yards a game if they're ever going to be a really good offense. And I don't know how they're going to get to that point next year. Maybe the running backs make that much of a difference, and some of those guys coming back on the offensive line makes a difference. But I suppose it goes a long way to keeping balance if both Tyrese Ritchie and Ross Bowers are connecting next year. Otherwise, like again, I think who's going to be the quarterback next year makes a big difference for what the potential is for NIU's offense.
This team, like just the way it's kind of set up and the way that we're kind of presenting, how in trouble is Thomas Hammock, being the coach of his own team, how much of a bad situation did he put himself in or whatever, or how far of a hole does he have to dig himself out of even? Yeah. It kind of feels like it's shaping up to a situation that Chuck Martin found himself in. Like they're starting at different points, right? I can't compare like when Hammock was, like, they're definitely different, but it looks like just looking at the roster that they're so young and like it's just so realistically so far ahead before they're like at competitive averageness to above averageness. We might be setting ourselves up for a situation where if Hammock's not incredibly wanted and gets fired like next year after a bad year, then he's going to have to be there for 7 or 8 years. Like it's going to be one of those situations where like get rid of him after 3 or keep him around for 7 or 8. And that's the one that we have to figure out which one it's going to be.
And he's got a few years left on that contract. He's got the chance to prove himself. But if he comes out of the gates next year and they start like 0-6, I mean, what are you looking at? What are you optimistically looking at in terms of where this program can be under this leadership?
Graduation that said, rates? Like I have no idea. I really have no idea if they're getting better or worse under that.
The GPA is better. We'll say that. The GPA is better. I think because of the types of player that Hammock's able to bring in, the potential is really high. I've thought that since day one. I think this program's been hit with a cold dose of reality over the last 2 years and how somebody not prepared immediately can make a big difference. I still think NIU could be at the top of the MAC again in 2 years if they play their cards right, just based on the types of players they're bringing to DeKalb. But you got to retain them. The coaching staff's got to figure out what's going to work, what their identity is going to be, and they can't afford to have a bunch of misses. Some of these guys in here now as freshmen and sophomores have to be studs in a year.
They need playmakers on the field. They don't have time for development.
Like that's what this year was for. Yeah, they got 6 games. That's what this year was for. So 2021, you have to see a significant step forward at a lot of spots.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm 100% with you.
I'm sure there's a lot we could get into with NIU in terms of all that. I do think that NIU is going to see a pretty decent improvement this year. I don't think the defense is going to be great still. As you noted, 38 points per game last year, and they're going to see a lot of the same guys back. But Alex, what do you think? Where do you think the program stands overall in terms of like respectability in this conference, and then like the way that people see them?
God, that's tough to say. I mean, I don't know. How did they do against Toledo again? Let's remind me there. Like, how did they do against Toledo? I really ask because I just don't remember the game anymore. Like, it's so far out of my mind because it was not the best rendition of NIU Toledo, which is, apparently the series of the MAC. Like, that is the bar of the MAC. That was the game that was put on the first Wednesday night of the season for a reason, because everyone expected so much out of them because of what they expected out of themselves. And it's just not up to that level of where the MAC needs that series to be.
There were a lot
I don't know if that answers your question at all, but
there were a lot of games this year where NIU looked like they could be NIU in the first half of games. The second half, Toledo was one of those games. And
they lost 24-41. That's why I don't remember it.
Yeah, it was a forgettable game. A lot of games when NIU has looked good in the first half has dropped off the face of the earth there. If NIU wants to be where it needs to, or is going to get to where it needs to be, you kind of got to flip that.
NIU they need to start 0 points in the second half of that game.
Yeah, they need to be good now. They need to figure that out. They got to improve. It's got to happen now. 2021 is a make or break year. You can win 4 games and it still be an improvement if you show like the leap, if you see the consistency, see the identity starting to form, and see a lot of guys make big strides. Yeah. 2 wins isn't going to cut it. This program's not going anywhere if they win 1 or 2 games this year. So again, a lot to say about NIU. I think we went a little bit longer than we had in some of our episodes, but Lord knows that's how it goes sometimes. So MAC football forever. I'm Alex. That's Alex. I'm Alex. You're Alex.
We're all Squidward.
Signing off for Mac Football Forever. I'm Caleb Carter. That's Alex Alvarado.
I'm Alex.
Follow us on Twitter, Mac FB Forever. Subscribe on YouTube. See you.